about yourself, Chuck?
Pretty good, pretty good. We're going to talk about your latest will contest amnesty shut down the federal government. And I got to ask you right off the bat, pardon me, boy, what is the problem? Some people are saying, if the government shuts down, the Democrats can get blamed for it, and it may affect their 2018 midterm elections. I've seen where people said, shut it down, and no pay during the shutdown for any federal employees, all the way from the top to the bottom. Just shut it down. And then also I remember whenever the last time it happened, when President Obama closed all those national parks. Remember that? Put the National Guard there with barricades?
Yeah.
I want to get your take on that. Number one, wouldn't it be nice if nobody got paid if they shut it down?
Yeah, well, the lead to my story, explains that the taxpayers will be footing a vacation, paid vacation for employees of the federal government. Now, I know a lot of people say that, every federal employee should not receive a paycheck. And you have to keep in mind that, the military and its members, they're part of the federal government tax roll, and they would, they're living, a lot of them are living paycheck to paycheck, and they couldn't withstand this. Yeah, well, there is. Well, there is. There are certain security measures that the United States government just would not shut down, like, parts of the NSA, parts of the CIA, other intelligence, FBI. But who goes home? They're generally considered, non-essential employees, and those are the people that generally will get the paid vacation. They know they're going to get their paycheck delayed, but they know they'll get it. So it could hurt them if they don't have enough to pay for rent or something like that. But typically you're talking about non-essential employees, and it's really for more dog and pony show than anything. This is an acting drill.
Non-essential. I think the last time it happened, and I could be flip-flop on my figures, it's either like 214,000 non-essential or 412,000 non-essential employees. And little people like me would say, if they're non-essential, how come we have so many of them?
Yeah, well, you see, therein lies another little bit of a predicament, and you're already seeing with President Trump, and he's already directed a lot of his cabinet officials to say, look, we're not necessarily going to fire people, but when they retire, we're just not going to hire anybody to replace them. And that's the route that this administration is going to take. And they've already pared down the employee roles. So far in this first year, we've seen that done, and that happens. So and that's a good thing for the American people. Eventually, the government, hopefully, hopefully, will stop spending more than it takes in here, and we can start eating away at the massive, debt that we have currently, approaching $21 trillion, basically.
Yeah, and this whole thing about DACA, the Dreamers, and we already know from the memo that came out earlier in the week, I guess it was, that how important they said DACA was for the Democrats. This was a memo that went out to Democrats talking about, you got to get this passed.
Yeah.
Because DACA is what's going to ensure us of getting all those votes. That's like the bottom line for the next 10, 40, 50 years. We need those votes.
It is, and that was Jennifer Palomari, who was Barack Obama's communications director, and also was a communication director for Hillary Clinton's failed attempt at the White House.
Yeah, I knew you would have it right there, right? Absolutely. And we're going to take our break, and we're going to continue. Kimberly Dvorak, streaming live, Periscope.com, and you can read her report at gov't.com. That's gov't.com. We'll be right back. And the One American News Network. And you can also catch her streaming live at Periscope.com. That's the right
They did. It's actually the deferred action for parents of Americans who were brought to the country illegally. It's basically the fact that a lot of these I'll refer to them as young people because they're not necessarily kids any longer. Were brought to the country in the hopes that they would be granted amnesty. And this group of individuals, as you say, their average age is getting near 31, 32 years old. And I think what I found a little more appalling about this is that, the Democrats were going to be tying this to the spending bill that's going to actually employ our military troops that are overseas. And they are taking more of an interest in people who came to this country unlawfully. Okay, now a lot of them came here with their parents, and nobody's giving that, nobody's disputing that. That's happened. That's a fact. However, what a new report came out stated was that 24% of these DACA young people don't speak English. And for President Obama to come out and say that this is the only country they've ever known, why don't they speak English? And then the report went on to say that approximately 46% of people who are eligible for DACA status are illiterate. That means they have zero education. So if this is the only country they know, why aren't they going to the public schools, which, by the way, is a law? I mean, you have to, enroll your child in school. I'm not certain they'll come arrest you for it, but it's a law. You should be taking part in that. So for me, it's kind of a slap in the face for Americans who work really hard, pay taxes, send their kids to school, go to soccer games on the weekend, watch their kids grow up. And to hear and to see the numbers, the staggering numbers. We're not talking like 1% or 5%. We're talking 46 are illiterate. So how are they going to fulfill that American dream? And what were they doing the last 10, 15, 20 years?
Kimberly, and you have an interesting paragraph in this report. Well, all of it's very interesting, but you think about, you hire somebody to do a job. And then if they don't do the job, you have a reason to complain, all right? Mm-hmm. And I'm getting to President Trump because, as you say, he's not out. He doesn't want to punish children. He says, and you have a statement from the president, mm-hmm. As president, my highest duty is to defend the American people and the Constitution of the United States of America.
Yep.
I do not favor punishing children, most of whom are adults, for the actions of their parents. But then he gets into the laws. We are a nation of laws, that's helping holding us together. So why should we bend them,
Yeah, and I think that as most of us, we're compassionate. You're compassionate. I'm compassionate. I don't think that it's going to be fair at this point to send a lot of these people back to their home nations. But I don't think they ought to be getting the right to vote. They ought to be able to collect a green card, and they should be able to work, but they should have access to zero benefits. And if they want family reunification, they need to go back to their home country. And they, from here on out, they'll be right with the law. And if they're convicted of any kind of crimes, they should be subject to deportation immediately after the court proceedings have taken place. And then I also think that, people would be, if they decided they're going to live here, which the majority of them just want to live a quiet life here, and that's fine. But they don't get that right to vote. They don't get to become an American citizen. And if they decide they want to be an American citizen, then they can go back to their home country, get in line like everybody else did, and get here legally. Other than that, I think Americans, we're giving people, we're compassionate people, and we look at this and we're like, okay, this is kind of a screwed up scenario, if I can say that. But they shouldn't be granted amnesty just because of the circumstances of their parents. I mean, if you or I were to go to jail, are we saying that our kids need to have a free life because, the parents made a bad decision and maybe we shouldn't separate the family? it's the parents go to prison and that's it, and they live with aunts and uncles or foster care or whatever. So I mean, the Democrats are asking us to look at the situation and create a completely unfair scenario for those of us who just want to follow the law and those of us who believe in our Constitution. And I don't think that at this point we can throw them all out, but there's also a hefty portion of these dreamers that are convicted criminals, and these just aren't these aren't the dreamers that I keep hearing about on TV. So.
Yeah. And whenever you mentioned, we already accept over 1 million yearly. We're the most generous country in the world, and we take in more combined than all the other countries in the world. Mm-hmm. Why is it they think they get to go to the speed lane, the speed path, like you're Disneyland or something?
Yeah. Well.
What makes it special? Because why do you think? Because there was a Democrat who made a really big mistake, went against the Constitution of the United States, and opened up the can of worms. His name? Obama.
Yeah.
All right? He's the one that started this whole thing. And why do you think? Because this Democrat trying to gather all these votes is to put everybody else ahead of the line. Can Trump do that now? Can he fix those countries?
Well, I mean,
I'll just bring him in here so that they can vote Republican.
Yeah, no, I mean that President Trump wouldn't do something like that. But what he is doing is he's actually enforcing the unlawful law that Barack Obama signed, because that came with the sunset date. That meant that at March 15th, DACA program ended, and there was no more DACA program. So what you're seeing is, the President Obama left this in the lap of the Republicans to try to come in and fix it. And then, of course, if they send some of these people back, then they're evil, mean people. They don't like people who immigrate to this country, and all they want to do is keep the white old guys back there in power. And this is nothing more than a political stunt. However, there's about 800,000 or so of these DACA eligible young people that it's not a joke for them. I mean, this really is, am I going to be living here or am I going to be living there? That's why I think American people we're fair. We're fair-minded. We're saying, okay, look, you came under, it wasn't lawful, but we're willing to give you a green card, but you're never going to be a citizen. You are never going to be a citizen unless you leave and go back and get in line and come back the lawful way. You're not going to be able, and if something like that passed, that would end chain migration, because a green card holder cannot bring family members to this country. And one last thought on this chain migration, and I know the Democrats seem to have they go out and talk about this, family reunification is, the best way to keep families together and all this. Well, what is so bad if they love their families so much, then why are they coming here? And why aren't they staying there? And then when they see families, like the whole family's illegal and they deport the entire family, nobody is telling these folks that are in the country illegally, oh, we're going to keep your kids here so you can't take them back with you. So, I mean, people, when you sit down and you try to... Yeah.
This whole premise about, you're breaking up the family, that's the whole thing. Coming out of the shadows of comprehensive, and you're breaking up the family. When the father or the mother left and left the kids and the wife behind, that was when the family was broken up. And that wasn't the fault of the United States, that was the fault of the country that you're coming from.
Exactly.
And then you've got to look at the way that a lot of Americans look at it too. When we see the protest from the dreamers, and burning American flags and giving us the finger, that ain't the way to achieve citizenship in the United States either, unless you're getting, the wrong leader telling you that.
Well,
I'm saying there's a right way and a wrong way.
There's a right way and a wrong way, and if you actually go in and talk to, and I've talked to several people who immigrated to this country from South America, Central America, Mexico, and they're actually quite upset that the fact that these people are actually stepping to the front of the line, because they're the ones that paid their attorneys to do this the right way, go through all the background checks, go through all the medical checks, all on their own dime. And then when they get here, they pay these green card fees, or $300, $400, $500 every year. You have to pay that if you're a green card holder to the U.S. government. So they're saying, look, we've had to pay our way and got here. We waited. We did what we were asked to do, and that is just something that they're upset about as well. But again, it's not something that the mainstream media is putting out there. That's not the narrative that they want. And I just like to add one other point to this when you talk about the million plus that come to this country, legally every year. Senator Rand Paul came up with a great idea, and I hadn't thought of it. I can't take credit for it. This is solely what he had put out there. He said, well, why don't we do something with the DACA kids? We say, okay, there's 800,000. So this year we allow 200,000 to become legalized and get their green cards and get right with the law and all that. But on the other side, now we're going to take 200,000 from that million. So now we're only going to allow 800,000 to come into the country legal. Until we've got this settled, then we'll go back to what we did. But why not offset it that way? And I thought that was a very fair, another fair way to look at this. So.
A couple of people that have actually, Center for Immigration Studies and people from various immigration groups that have mentioned that,
Yeah.
All right. So, and some people would like to get it down to zero because, we're bringing in, and the H-1B visa, my goodness, that's like Orville Dam in California wasn't repaired and busted,
Yeah.
In your report, you mentioned that the K-12 school program for these students is $13,000 a year.
Yeah, at least in California is one of the highest states for what it costs to educate a student. So when you hear pundits on the left talking about, they're paying more into the system than they're getting out. Well, it costs, if they have kids, it's $13,000 per child. I really don't believe that these illegal immigrants coming to this country are making and paying more than $13,000 in taxes to cover that school education. And then of course the roads are down. I mean, there's a litany of items that they don't pay for but they get benefits from without being citizens of this country. And so to me, when it's a false argument for the left to make against this, because these folks are illegally in the country, and the majority of them are not educated, and they are very they're working very low skilled jobs, which there's nothing wrong with that. I think a lot of our young kids, mine as well, I made them work at low paying jobs until they got themselves moved up and moving on, and that there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with hard work. But if the American citizens are being told that your tax dollars is not going to pay for this, they're being lied to, because these people are certain. What if they have 3 kids? I mean, are they? How much? That's a lot in taxes to have to pay if you think just 3 kids just for school. So it's just it's an argument that is a very sad argument, and unfortunately, mainstream media will not cover these types of issues because for the most part they just believe that they're right and their side's right, and we know that 90+% of the media is covering from the perspective of the Democrat side. So there's a huge injustice being told here, and perhaps we can change that narrative.
And the Democrats are not going to cover that. There's another thing that you really don't hear too much about. And, we don't have Ellis Island. We don't have a big medical facility on every border checking people that come in from other countries.
Yeah.
And it's already a proven fact that there's a lot of old diseases that we got rid of, and you mentioned touch on that in this report, that are now popping up again, and maybe it didn't originate, let's say, in Mexico. Maybe it originated in China.
Yeah.
But they come into Mexico to get in the United States. It's not all Mexico.
No.
It's the other countries because they know we don't have a border. Okay?
Exactly. Well, and I got one of those letters from my son's school district saying that we have a student who's tested positive for pertussis, which is whooping cough, which has come roaring back in the state of California, And if you're pregnant, you need to go see your OBGYN. If you're susceptible to that kind of thing, go to the doctor. And my first thought was, okay, well, are they going to pay for the doctors? I mean, a lot of these people, if you go to the doctor, they're going to charge you money for that. But, they have no problem in getting this, put out there. So, I mean, it happens. I get these notices a lot, so.
I'll be right there, Kimberly. We're going to be right back. Kimberly DeVorak, award-winning National Security Board and Security Investigative Reporter. She's streaming live at Periscope.com. You can get her report, thekbreport.com. That's thekbreport.com. She's everywhere. DeVorak, D-V-O-R-A-K. Experience the romantic getaway you deserve at Mountain Premier Bed and Breakfast, The Plantation Inn. With plantation-style architecture and decor combined with modern amenities such as dual rain showers and whirlpool hot tubs, get relaxed in a tranquil oasis in the heart of Mountain's historic Lahaina town. The inn is situated conveniently less than 2 blocks from Lahaina Harbor, as well as the famous French built for a great of shops, restaurants, gallon walks, and museums. The Plantation Inn is home to Gerard's Restaurant, voted Open Table's top most romantic restaurant in North America. Chef Gerard's contemporary Isaac French cuisine consistently earns some of the highest ratings in Hawaii. Come discover why Hawaii magazine readers named the Plantation Inn #1 best bed and breakfast in Hawaii. Visit theplantationinn.com or call us at 667-9225. What are you going to do with your old car? You could try selling it, you could junk it, or you could donate it to Heritage for the Blind. Your car will be towed away for free, and your donation is tax deductible. Just call 1-800-785-9618. Heritage for the Blind accepts cars, vans, trucks, and boats. It doesn't matter if your vehicle runs or not. It'll be towed away for free, and you'll be supporting those that need help. Heritage for the Blind is a nonprofit organization that helps the visually impaired live fuller lives. Call right now to donate your car, and as a special thank you for calling, you'll receive a free 3-day vacation voucher to many exciting locations. Call Heritage for the Blind right now, 1-800-785-9618. Donate accordingly, and your vehicle is towed away for free. Plus, you'll get a free vacation voucher. Call now, 1-800-785-9618. That's 1-800-785-9618. Say, Lorraine, do you realize that your mother, my mother-in-law, Chef Maria, has been serving Las Vegas since 1949? Yes, I do, Dennis. That's when she first met Howard Hughes, fell in love with her cooking. And in 1955, she opened her first restaurant on Fremont Street. Yes, dear. And another great customer was Liberace. Wow. Then in 1952, while Frank Sinatra and the Rat Pack were causing global excitement on the Las Vegas Strip, your family opened their second restaurant. And in 1972, Elvis Presley began electrifying Las Vegas audiences and feeding in our restaurant. You know, Lorraine, this is quite a town. There's only one Las Vegas. And there's only one Bootlegger Italian Bistro. Folks, when you're in Las Vegas, come visit us. We'll make you feel like you're part of Las Vegas. The Bootlegger Italian Bistro, conveniently located at 7700 Las Vegas Boulevard, South Strip. Visit our website at www.bootleggerlasvegas.com. Everybody's cold. Chef Wilder, we are again with my guest, Kimberly DeVorak. And, it's interesting. We got Lindsey Graham, okay, and we got John McCain and others too, but those are the two main critters that they've never seen an amnesty that they want to turn down,
Yeah.
You're always up against that.
Well, I mean, we saw earlier this week that Lindsey Graham basically got thrown out of the White House for coming to him and bringing a proposal that was, in essence, just give these people amnesty today, and we'll give you $1 billion for the border fence, which we know will never get built at that cost. Although I'm sure Trump could come in under budget, as he always likes to refer to, but. And instead of ending chain migration, they said they also wanted the TPS program, the temporary protected status program for all these Haitians and El Salvadorians and a few of the Central American countries, which is 200,000 or 300,000 people. They wanted them to get amnesty as well, so they could permanently stay here. So I think that when you look at the deal he brought, I mean, it was really quite insulting to President Trump to see that Lindsey Graham would bring such a piece of paper to the White House, especially after they had the open door press conference essentially where they were all trying to talk about the ideas, and it seemed to me that even a few of the Democrats were okay with ending the visa lottery, which is like winning a lottery ticket. You get to come to America, and the last 2 terrorist attacks, as we know, were committed by people who actually were part of that lottery system. So that seems like a no-brainer that they should get here. And it also, that he wants a little bit more of this merit-based people coming to the country, people that we know are not going to be taking food stamps. The Center for Immigration Studies, who you mentioned earlier, they came out and said that, this was from the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office. They did a report and they said within 10 years that the majority of these DACA recipients and as well as the TPS recipients, within 10 years, they'd all be on food stamps. That 1 in 5 would be in food stamps. Why do we want to bring people to the country that are going to be an economic burden? And this is where you get, push comes to shove, because the Democrats see them as potential voters for them. We'll give you more free stuff, Obama phones, Obamacare, we'll give you all this free stuff. And some Republicans, not all I must say, some Republicans are, sounding the alarm bell saying, we can't afford this. I mean, we're spending more than we take in right now. How can we continue down this path? And then also, just one other thing, I think that this came from the Center for Immigration Studies as well, that when the younger kids are, or young people are working, they aren't necessarily a burden on society. But when they get older, they become a burden because they're taking more in Social Security benefits than they've paid into. They're getting more health care than they've paid into. So then they become a net taker and not a net giver. And I mean, and I know people, will watch this and say that's cruel. How can you say stuff like that? Well, I can just say that if you think that we're cruel by talking about it here, then you must think Canada's racist. You must think Australia is racist. You must think a majority of the EU nations are racist. It just, other countries don't allow this to happen, and America has really been just the, where you can go to get some free stuff. Unfortunately, it's time for us to pay the piper.